Delegates, research scholars, teachers, and my dear students. Today, on the occasion of first day of International Conference MESKCON on the title Explore, Engage, Evolve, Navigating the Future, we got an eminent personality and blessed with the auspicious presence of Professor Rizwan Patsal. He is actually an Hungarian scholar and studied ancient scripts and ancient philosophy, patristics, and specializing in Byzantine history and early Christianity. He earned his candidate science degree in 1995 at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Since 1994, he has been teaching with extensive research breaks at Central European University, known for expertise in Dionysius the Areopagite and Saint St. Thomas Christians. He leads a project digitizing Syriac and Malayalam manuscripts in South India. Also, he is notable for work in phenomenology, philosophy of mind, and exploring the relationship between consciousness and embodiment. He translated a significant part of Plotinus' Aeneid into Hungarian, published in 1986. Between 1990 and 1994, he was a visiting lecturer at the University of Pax at the Department of Literature. His area of study, emblematic work of the encounter of Christianity with Platonic philosophy, the corpus ascribed to Dionysius the Areopagite. He was the first to condemn it as heresy in the mid-6th century under name Origenism. His research is late antique and medieval philosophy. He has authored many articles and books in philosophy and ancient history. He is now going to deliver a lecture on the title An Indian Christian Perspectives on Judaism, Christianity and Islam, Alexander of the Port's poems on the Arabic and Syriac and Hebrew languages. I invite Rizwan Patsal to present his topic.
Can you handle the Sure. I think it's appropriate to speak about the past. But I think it's also about the future. What brought me here in India in the year 2000, let's say, 24 years ago, was to explore, in order to engage later, the archives, the local archives. And here I would like to speak about a concept about past and future, because we are in the post-colonial era, and for studying history in the post-colonial era, there are several attempts. And you certainly know about post-colonial studies, and you certainly know about the famous saying of Dipesh Chakrabarty, reading the evidence against the grain. This is now very popular. And I would like to say that if we read the evidence against the grain, we are still reading the same evidence. That is to say, we are still in the same circle. There were things said in the colonial period or in a colonial mindset, and now we are saying the opposite, reading the same evidence. What brought me here was to find new evidence that is not found in Europe, because the way we are constructing history is using the colonial archives. And the colonial archives have been already screened. We have in the European archives those things that the colonial powers thought important, or those to which they had access. And then, even while reading the evidence against the grain, we are still constructing a distorted image of history. So I think that, and I'm not alone with this, there are more and more colleagues, for example, in India who think like this, that the way of discovering the history, the hidden treasures of history is not simply to obtain a scholarship to go to London and work in the archives of the Foreign Office and then read the same evidence, but to go to the rich archives that are here lying in India and that very few people are interested in. So what I was interested in was to go knock on the doors of Indian archives and see what they contain. And here I will show you a little discovery among many. Why? Because we have discovered a 17th century poet who was active here in Kerala, and he was writing in a language which is my research, Syriac. And he was a Malayali for whom the language of culture was Syriac, because for the Indian, the local Indian Christians, so-called St. Thomas Christians or Syrian Christians, Syriac played the same role as Sanskrit for the Hindu communities or Arabic for the Muslim communities. So when the European missionaries came and wanted to convert to their new Catholic faith the local Christians who had another faith, then they tried to introduce Latin. They tried to speak to them in their mother tongue, in Malayalam, and they did not receive. Because the only thing they wanted to receive, and which was significant for them, was this language which was their sacred language, Syriac. So I came here basically to study the Syriac manuscripts, and then at a moment I understood that Syriac is only the surface, and if I don't study Malayalam, which I still don't speak, but which I can read, then I don't really understand what is going on here. Okay. So that's
the point here. Sir, here. Yes.
Okay. So one little discovery, which is big discovery for me, is this 17th century poet in Malayalam, Kadavil Chandi, Kattanar means priest, who had a very important role in the turbulent events of the 17th century, and he was known, his name at least was known, and it was known that he was a very gifted poet. He had very great reputation, at least within the Christian community, but his poetry was unknown. So what I first will relate to you is how we discovered a poet. We still don't know where the limits of this poetry are, because we are discovering more and more poems written by him in a very interesting style, which was combining Indian elements, Middle Eastern, Syriac elements, and European elements, because he was a pupil of the Jesuits. So here you see his chronology. He was born in 1588, and 1599 is a famous event when the Portuguese organized a synod to condemn the so-called Nestorian faith of the local Christians. And after that, a very gifted Jesuit missionary, Francisco Rose, became the bishop of these Christians. He was imposed upon them after a lot of strife. Now, Rose was the first Jesuit bishop in history, because in the Jesuit order it was forbidden to accept the rank of bishopric. But the problem was, Rose had a unique characteristic which other people did not have. He was an excellent Syriacist. He knew Syriac, he could speak beautifully and write beautifully Syriac, and this was the only thing that these local Christians appreciated. So there was nobody else who could have made a bishop and whom they would have accepted, because anybody who doesn't know Syriac was somebody contemptible for them. It is like a Brahmin who doesn't know Sanskrit. That's impossible. And after him, there were other Jesuit bishops, because first he didn't want to accept, because it was forbidden to him according to rules of his monastic order. But finally he had to accept. And after that, there were other less gifted Jesuit bishops. And his best local pupil, who learned Syriac from him, was this Kadavil Chandi, who translated his name as Alexander of the Port. Of course, Kadavil is not precisely port, it's rather the jetty, okay? But he translated his name into Syriac as Alexander of the Port. Now, Rose was not a racist. He really loved the local Christians, but apparently his successors were racist. And they appointed, as there was a famous Jesuit seminary at Vaipikotta, and Rose was, before becoming bishop, the professor of Syriac there. But after Rose's death, they appointed European professors of Syriac. But these were people who were appointed because of the color of their skin. They didn't know very good Syriac, while this Kadavil Chandi, who was the best pupil of Rose, and everybody respected him for his great knowledge of Syriac, was not appointed. So when Philip Mascarenhas, Viceroy of India, visited Cochin, then the Archdeacon, Thomas Pakalomattan, led a delegation to the Viceroy full of complaint against the then Bishop Francisco Garcia. And one of the complaints was that ignorant people were appointed to teach Syriac when there is Kadavil Chandi. But of course they didn't listen to this. With all these issues, this led to a revolt of the local Christians in 1653 at Matancheri, the famous Kunan Kurishu Satyam, and Kadavil Chand decided by the then Archdeacon, who later became the first Martoma bishop. But then he was, when there was this assembly of Edapalli, Kadavil Chandi read the praise of the Babylonian Catholicos Patriarch. But then, for some reasons, he returned to the Catholic fold. In 1663, the Dutch ousted the Portuguese from Cochin, and there came a Carmelite missionary, Giuseppe Maria Sebastiani, and he appointed a local bishop, Parambil Chandi, Alexander de Campo, and Kadavil Chandi was with Alexander de Campo. And finally, in 1673, he died. This is basically the story. Go ahead. Can you show the map, because nothing is visible here? Ah, that's it. So these are the most important places. He was born at Kabuki. Okay. Now, let us move further. Then, please. Ah, yes. Let us go further. Please move. This was the Vaipikotta seminary where Kadavil Chandi did not become professor. These are the ruins. Go further, please. This is the tombstone of Archbishop Rose, who was the teacher of Kadavil Chandi. This is a representation of the Kunan cross oath. Yes. This is a mural in Angamali of Martoma I, the archdeacon who became the bishop, and with whom Kadavil Chandi first sided before he returned to the Catholics. Please go ahead. It is here in the church at Alangad where Martoma was consecrated. Please. Again, please. And this is a representation of Marchandi Parambil, who became the first local Catholic bishop. Yes. And this is a much later issue. This monastery was founded by the end of the 19th century, and it was in the library of this monastery that I found the poetry, the first manuscripts of it. Then we found other manuscripts as well, but here is where I discovered the poetry of Kadavilchandi. Please go ahead. This is the preparation for the digitization. Go ahead. So this is how they were digitizing our manuscripts, and next. And this was the key manuscript for the identification, because we knew about only one poem of Kadavilchandi, Kattanar, a poem on the Incarnation and the Eucharist, which he sent as a gift to Pope Alexander VIII, accompanied with a letter. And I found this letter as well. Please, once again. So here his name is mentioned. This is the Memra, that is to say teaching poem, composed by Presbyter Alexander the Indian, also called of the port. This is translated from the Syriac, on the Eucharist of Christ. It should be sung upon the melody of We Virgin. This is because this poetry was written according to pre-existent patterns, and there was in the Eastern Church, in the Nestorian Church, there was this melody and this poetic meter practiced. And here you can read, it's about the Trinity, the Incarnation. The important thing was that this poem with this meter could be identified. It is not my merit, because a very excellent local scholar, Father Immanuel Telli, has already found this poem. This was the only poem of Kadavilchandi which was known before my work. And here is the letter that he sent together with this poem to the Pope. But we found this also in the Indian archives, two copies. And this is interesting. I have translated this part of the letter, which has been published, to the glorious and holy and patron see of the Romans, which our Lord has called in his grace and placed in his love, set up holily his ship and so on, to Lord Pope Alexander VIII, peace. Now the interesting part is what I translated. It is from the later part of the letter, and I, the most wretched man among all the wretched, have sent through his beloved hands, that is to say by the hands of Giuseppe Maria Sebastiani, before the glorious and holy see of your beatitude, a small writing, written by my madness on the holy sacrament of the Eucharist, which your beatitude should give to a reader, so that he may see and read it, and may clearly make your beatitude know all that is in it. And then he doesn't speak to the Pope anymore, because he's not so interested in the Pope. What he's interested in is to present his knowledge of Syriac to the Syriacists of the Vatican. Because these people were so proud of their knowledge of Syriac that they were like humanists, proud of their erudition. Please go back. O venerable reader, in loving supplication of petition, I approach you and all those who are going to enjoy the poem of my conception, that, if they were to find in it some mistake or barbarism, they should not hasten to dismiss it and to throw a stone of abuse on me, but should illuminate my carelessness, feebleness, and madness, and should pray for me assiduously. This is, of course, simulated humility. He's terribly proud of his great knowledge. Please go ahead. Now, among the poems, there are three particularly interesting, which we are editing, translating, and publishing now. So I hope that soon this work will be finished, and there will be an edition of 5 poems of Kadavilchandi. The first is on the Eucharist, Then there are 3 poems on languages: the Arabic language, the Syriac language, and the Hebrew language. It's interesting that he was interested in all these languages. And please don't get scandalized, because in all these poems he is harsh. He's critical of anything else than Catholicism, because this is what he learned from his missionary teacher, basically Francisco Rose. He's a very gifted person who is handling the language beautifully. Sometimes the Syriac that he's using is not perfectly Syriac, because they were also producing a dictionary. And this was a dictionary, this was a Syriac Malayalam dictionary that they were using for teaching Syriac, and unfortunately it was not always precise. So sometimes we don't understand what Kadavi Chandi means by a Syriac expression. Then we have to go to the dictionary and see how it is translated into Malayalam, because it is in this sense that he's using it. So our edition will need a lot of explanation for unknown Syriac terms, which are only through the dictionary that they can be understood. Next. So, please don't be scandalized. Here he says very ugly words about Muhammad. But he says very beautiful words about the Arabic language, which he considers as the most beautiful language on earth, the most excellent language, and he praises its achievement in philosophy and medicine. But he is disparaging the Quran, so excuse me for presenting this, but this is truth, what can I say? This language was granted by Father Abraham, the father of the Arabic language, to his son Ishmael, as a gift of love. And from Ishmael, his children received this beloved language. For this reason, it is renowned and exceedingly illustrious among all those who follow the sect of the adversary law of the wicked Muhammad. Sorry for, I don't identify with this. The unclean teacher and wolf, and in it was also written Al-Quran, which speaks foolishly and which is contained all their hateful law, and which is and through its knowledge the whole world became rotten as if from uncleanliness, and was filled with its dreadful tidings, and all the corners of the world were filled as though with an oven. Sorry for that. I could have, basically I didn't perfectly know, but I wanted to present the perspective on the 3 religions which he is rejecting. So the local religion of the Christians, he is rejecting it. Islam, he is rejecting it, and Judaism, he is rejecting it. But at the same time, he praises the fantastic beauty of these 3 languages. So, can we? This is the next one is a teaching poem on the Syriac language. And this is a fragment from it. You see this mem, nun, he. He ordered these poems according to the letters of the Syriac alphabet. So it begins with Alap, and then it goes until Tav, and then if it's a long poem, then from Tav it goes back also to Alap. So this is mem. It is useful for us to destroy the heresy. Heresy is that of the local Christians. And to pull down the wall that is full of heretical doctrine. And we are walking in faith of holiness, and this liberates us from the world of curse, and delivers us from abuse and from defilement, so that we may be seen in good order and excellence. Away with Nestorius, the son of Gehenna, the satanic. So you see, it's not only Muhammad who is disparaging. Also with Theodore, the wretched, cursed, who goes to Gehenna. This is the great teacher of the Syriac church, Theodore of Mopsuestia. Joseph Busnaya, the blasphemous, who goes to the torment. It was here, there was, they were reading the life of Joseph Busnaya by Yohanan bar Kaldon, and this was condemned by the Synod of Dianke. So this Persian Joseph Bosnian. Hormis the abominable, the foul, the great demoniac. Abdisho the serpent, the basilisk, the basilisk. We have found the books written by Abdisho, which were condemned to be burned but were not burned because the local Christians preserved them as a kind of anti-colonial resistance. Hananisho, who is full of Satanism, and many other accursed sons of Sheol, who like perverse wolves put on the garbs and outward appearance of the innocent Diophysite sheep of the household. Okay, he doesn't say only ugly things, but now for some reason I chose these. Sorry for, perhaps I thought it would be more interesting. So these, yes. And finally, there is this memra on the Hebrew language. And it's very interesting that for all the three languages, he extols them as the most beautiful language. So he says there's no more excellent language than Arabic. Then he says about the Syriac language that this is the language that Jesus spoke and the apostles spoke and his mother spoke as well, and in which the gospel was preached. But when he turns to the Hebrew, he says that this is the language that Jesus spoke and the apostles spoke, and so he's even contradicting himself in extolling the importance. But about the Hebrew language, he says something very interesting, because he says that this is the language of the angels, and this is the language that Adam and Eve spoke in paradise, and this is the language that will be spoken again when the blessed will be in heaven. So he says it's high time that you sit and learn the Hebrew language because you will need it in paradise. Please go ahead. But of course, you see, he's not sparing the Jews either. As to the perfidious heretical Jews, the vicious sons, it turned them, that is to say the Hebrew language, into beloved sons and conquered them back from their misdeeds. It preached to them the faith and taught them the truth, the hope of all virtue, and the love that is full of sweetness. By it was preached the faith of the Holy Trinity and the oneness that has been revealed in the Godhead. That is to say, he says that the apostles preached in Hebrew, which is certainly not true. And this is just the end of my presentation. I photographed this on an auto rickshaw. Unfortunately, the Jewish religion is not represented because the Jews have migrated to Israel. Basically, we are witnessing here a cohabitation of Hindus, Jews, Muslims, Christians, and many documents we have from the 17th century about debates between them. Among others, there is a dialogue written in Malayalam by Francisco Rose himself. And although there is a lot of harshness and criticism, basically you can observe that with all these quarrels, there is a certain conviviality in these, even within these debates, and I hope that this conviviality and good relationship between the communities continues here. Thank you. And if you have questions, I am very happy to respond. Or criticism, whatever.
Okay. Thank you. We got wonderful, excellent lecture. Thank you, sir. We got excellent lecture by Swan Pepsi. Now the session open for discussion. You can ask questions.
Please ask your questions. Please.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful session. And as a research scholar of history, we are always looking for the archives of Europe for getting information, especially the colonial records. Like we are looking into British Library or London archives for getting more to reconstruct the history of India. And this is an eye-opener for all of us to how to use the local sources that is available within Kerala to enrich the history of the locality. That is really an eye-opener. And thank you so much for that. The doubt that I wanted to ask you is that we have gone through some of the letters as well as the poems of Kadavil Chandi, whether they are offering any kind of glimpses to construct the socio-cultural history of the locality as well as the history of the native Christians apart from this colonial record. So since he is a native, definitely it will reflect the perspective of a native Christian, how it will be. So whether there is any kind of such things. And another thing, sir, this is not related to your presentation but related to your profile, that I have heard from Shivadasan sir that you are also researching or studying about this philosophy of mind. So I'm greatly interested about to know more about that. So could you please explain that also?
So unfortunately, this is not true. I don't know why they find out that, because philosophy of mind is now a subject of analytic philosophy. How knowledge is produced, the mind-body problem and things like that. I'm not dealing with this. Perhaps the misunderstanding came from the fact that I was dealing with Neoplatonist philosophy and also early patristic philosophy, and they are very much engaged in the question of the mind-body problem in their own times. So and I'm more interested in what these ancient people thought than what the present people think. I'm sorry to say this. But about what you say about the archives. So I just presented this because now we are publishing his poems. But we have found incredible things, really. So people did not even dream about the things that we found in these archives. Just one typical example for what I say about the screening by the colonial powers of the archival material. Of course, all this poetry did not reach Europe. The only poem that reached the Vatican was that one which he sent to the Pope. It was for local usage. But for example, in digitizing some material in the Cochin Latin Bishop Palace, I found a letter written in Latin from 1873 and signed by I don't know 100 and how many local St. Thomas priests, which is a letter of complaint against the then Carmelite Archbishop, I think Angelo di Bernardino, saying that these people are oppressing us. They are only interested in women and hunting. And we know the son of the bishop, you know that there was celibacy. We know the son of the bishop, and we know the lovers or the wives of the missionaries. And they are hating us, and we are the only wretched ones who don't get our own leadership, because these Europeans are placed above us. And the worst is, you, Holy Father, you are our only hope. But whenever we are writing a complaint to you, it's intercepted and it never reaches Rome. Now that letter was intercepted and never reached Rome. It was in quite decent Latin, so I enjoyed reading it. The priests who didn't know Latin signed as they could. Some of them signed in Syriac, some of them signed in Malayalam. And this is just a typical example to show that if you go to the Foreign Office of the British Library, these things you will not find them. Or you go to the Vatican and you will not find, because it was intercepted and kept here. And so also there was this what I call the myth of Diampere, that in Diampere, the Diampere Synod, the manuscripts of the local Christians were burnt. And from the very beginning of my research, I supposed that this had not happened, because I could not imagine that they would just go and submit their manuscripts. So I thought, if we go to the archives, we will find those texts which were condemned at Diampere. And one after the other, we found them. So now I have a large collection of texts condemned at Diampere, which we found. And now we can know what was in these texts. It's a myth that everything was burned. It was not burned. And so on. Definitively, it's much cheaper also for you to go to the local archives and explore them. And I would like to, because this is navigating the future, in the future, before you go to Europe, go to your own archives where there are rotting thousands and thousands of very interesting documents. The only problem is that you should know the scripts and the languages. Malayalam you know, but whatever was written in the 17th century was written in a different kind of Malayalam. And the present Malayalam, Arya-Urdu, you know, but you will have to read Water-Urdu, Koler-Urdu, Garshuni Malayalam, Arabi Malayalam. You will have to read those scripts which were used by these people. And these are the difficulties. It's easier to read the English documents. Anything else?
Sir, thank you very much for the presentation. So I have a very humble question. Like you were talking about the works of or these poems. Are these really present at the archives of Chavara Kujako's archives or in Mannanam archives?
Yeah, in the Mannanam archives, but basically we found 3 manuscripts. 2 are from Mannanam and 1 is from Trishur, from the Chaldean Syrian church, because these are twin archives. So often you find related documents in the Mannanam Catholic archives and the Trishur Nestorian archives. Why? Because within the Syrian Christian Church, there was a split, as I told, in 1653 between the so-called Puttenkur and Parayakur. It is supposed that the Parayakur are those who sided with Rome and with the Jesuits, and the Puttenkur revolted. It is not true. This is not true. Almost nothing is true from what is being written normally. Because the Parayakur were called Parayakur because they wanted to follow the old traditions. And the old traditions were that of the Church of the East. What they didn't want new rites. And they were forced under Rome, and Rome they accepted, because this was, they accepted the supremacy of the Pope. What they did not accept, however, even the Parayakur, because the oath was that we will not accept the Portuguese and we will not accept the so-called Paulists, Sampalucaran, I think. So the Paulists are the Jesuits. So they were revolting against the Jesuit archbishops, and they stick to it. So there was the Chaldean movement, which always wanted to return to the Chaldean jurisdiction, which was the traditional one. And this movement continued up to the end of the 19th century, when the movement split. One part, and this is the work of Kyriakos Chavara, one part accepted finally the European supremacy under the condition that they get local bishops, because they didn't want to have foreign bishops. I told you about this Latin letter as well. The other part became radicalized, and they joined the Nestorian Church. This is the Trishur community. So if you go to the archives of Mannarkkad and Trishur, which seem to be belonging to two different churches, these are all from the same community. That is to say, the Chaldean movement within the Parayakur. And this was the majority. Neither the Puttenkur nor the Parayakur accepted this colonial oppression, but they had different kinds of resistance. This is what I believe to be the truth, and this is new. In every manual you say the Syro-Malabar Church originated from this schism from the 17th century. Nothing like this. The Syro-Malabar Church was founded in 1874, I think, or 6. Until then, there was Latin jurisdiction and Chaldean resistance.
But why it took such a long time to see light, all these works? Were kept aside deliberately, or was not found due to any other reasons?
There are several reasons. Basically, there was no genuine interest on the part of Europeans. When I submitted my funding application in 2004 to the German research funding and said, all the hidden historical documents are there, we will find them, then the response was by the expert whom the German Research Foundation consulted, that we very well know that such documents do not exist. But we give a part of the applied funding, of the funding applied for, because there are wars in the Middle East, and there will be copies of Middle Eastern manuscripts which are inaccessible in the Middle East and will be accessible in India. So I got my initial funding on the basis of an error that they made. Because one, they believe that the historical documents, of which some I presented here, do not exist. And on the other hand, they thought that the only value is to find copies. But what we found was a huge amount of historical documents. You can rewrite the whole history of those communities and also to the reaction of the colonial intervention. And I believe that if we go to other community archives, we will find the same thing. Especially, I have seen thousands and thousands and thousands of Muslim documents which are just rotting in the archives here, and nobody's studies them. Of course, there is a certain secrecy. To get the Mannarkkad archives opened, I had to wait for 10 years. I had to knock on the door of the Mannarkkad archives for 10 years until they let me in. But I persisted.
So still any possibility for us, like the aspirants of history, can we go there, visit and get accessible to those sacred documents, to be precise?
You have to try. You have to have good connections.
So there is a competition.
I had good connections. But even with good connections, I had to wait for 10 years.
So one side is connection and other side is history. So there is a big gap in between.
Yes, and also they will be less jealous to share the Syriac documents because they don't have Syriacists. But the Malayalam documents, which are written in modern Malayalam script, which everybody can read, they will be more reluctant to share. So I told you that Francisco Ruz was accepted because he knew good Syriac. And my luck was that I came as a Syriacist. So people were sharing with me their hidden treasures, saying, tell me what is in these manuscripts. So the service that we gave, even to Mannarkkad or other archives, was that I gave them a checklist of the manuscripts so that they know what they have. They didn't even, I went to the Syro-Malabar archives in Trivandrum and they said, you don't leave before you make the catalog. So in some days my team made the digitization, and I had to stay there until I made the catalog, and then I had to make, in Mannarkkad for example, I had to make the catalog not only of the manuscript but also of the printed material which was in serial. And until then I was not able to leave. They enclosed me there because this was their interest. But of course we have a lot of Malayalam documents and palm leaf documents about the economic and juridical functioning of the communities. And because it's more accessible for Indian scholars, now we have our friends at Sri Shankara University, in Delhi, at the Tata Institute of Social Studies, who are working on the palm leaf documents that we have digitized. So it's quite a new branch of study.
Sir, sorry, one more question. Every poem will have an ideology or idea behind it.
Yes.
So when you went through all these poems, did you feel the poet might have some idea to convey through it? What was the idea hidden in those poems?
I think that the idea was that of Rose, his teacher. As I told you, Rose was an exceptional figure. He had his own dogmatic blindness. So he was very instrumental in the condemnations of Diamber, because they used him to find the heresy. But he genuinely loved the people, and the people genuinely loved him. This is what there is a praise poem about Rose by Kadavil Chandi, and he writes very nice things about him. And the idea of Rose was, he saw that these people have a very high level of learning, and he wanted to create a new dogmatically acceptable Catholic doctrine in India, and a new elite which would be taught by the Jesuits all kinds of knowledge. So the poems on the Arabic language and the Hebrew language are exhorting the people to learn these languages. So he wanted a very learned priestly elite, which is a local elite, and his dream was that then there would be local bishops. So he really wanted to create a local hierarchy which is independent of Europe. But when he died, that was gone, and there came the typical colonial oppression. That's why there was a revolt. The revolt was not for dogmatic issues. They couldn't care less for dogmas here. They accepted the Pope, everything was accepted. What they could not accept, these were people who were proud, they thought they were high caste and whatever, and they said, we should not be oppressed by these Europeans. This is why there was this mission to Philip Mascarenhas, that accompanied that these people are oppressing us, and we are noble people. Why are they doing this with us? And that's why there was the revolt. And people think that all this has dogmatic issues. Not at all. It was far from all these dogmatic debates. Nobody understood what was going on at the Council of Trent. I found a very interesting little note in a manuscript which was condemned in Diamber but survived. It was a 16th century manuscript which says there is a strange heresy in Europe. It started in Gaul, in France. And these people don't accept the virginity, they don't accept the saints, they don't accept the intercession of the Virgin Mary. He describes Protestantism. And he says the pious king of the note says the pious king of Portugal, they quote some person like this, and he wanted to convince him to to return to the good faith. But he refused, and then the pious king of Portugal burned this man on the stakes. And then he says, these are very difficult things. One feels very bad even to speak about this. So a local Indian Christian who is told by the missionaries about what is happening in Europe, who try to explain to him that this is natural, and he says, what these crazy people are doing there in Europe. And this is a local perspective on Europe, which we don't have normally. This is, again, you don't find in the Foreign Office.
So this poetry finding, the poem findings are still incomplete. So we have yet to find more? Because
we
can
already
see
identified many. Some of them are upon the East Syriac pattern, basically following the meter of Narsai, the Nestorian poet. Some of them are following the meter of Ephraim, like the poem on the Hebrew language. And then there is a number of poems written on Latin patterns. And most probably these are also by W. Chandra. The idea was to create, and I think it was again Rose's idea, to create a liturgical year with local poetry, which is particular to this church. Now what happened was that there came all kinds of missions, all these things became mixed up, and then there were schisms within the church, and the people who were then using these manuscripts, everything was used that they found. So even at the end of the 18th century, we find liturgical books which contain Nestorian, Chaldean, Jacobite, Catholic prayers together, and it was the Martoma 6 personal prayer book. So he was praying from all these things together. Nobody knew anymore what is the origin of what, and they were using what they had. It's a very interesting new culture. It was not the culture that Rose wanted to initiate with a very clear dogmatic stand. It was a mixed culture which came about by all these influences, and this is also interesting.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for the questions.
Have any questions? Okay. Research world is wonderful. Actually, so many missionaries left a detailed account on research, particularly so many details, especially the native life. You see that Katanar, who was actually a native of Kadutirthi, and he was given some poems, and it was actually written in 16th century. We can see that after the conversions, the foreigners considered them as Indian Christians, and their contribution is highly immenseful, and it is a great help for the research scholars and to our students. And now the session has been closed.
through his wonderful lecture, has opened up new thoughts for us to explore new arenas in history. He has actually given us an opportunity or a stream like how we can open up our dreams to come true, and personally thanking him for that $1 million secret advice he has given to me, especially on the way. I will never forget that. And then I would like to thank our principal who took that special initiative to make this event a grand success. I would like to thank each and every faculty and everyone who has contributed to the success of this event. Thank you.